Well, we're joined on the program by the Commissioner of Innovation, Science and Technology in Lagos State, Mr. Olatubosun Alake. He joins us right here. Thank you so much, Mr. Bosun, for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
For the benefit of full disclosure, when you're here, Alake, are you related to the Minister of Steel?
I get that.
A Minister of Solid Mineral Development?
I get that question a lot. Yes, he's my father, actually.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
And incidentally, you have Olatubosun, which is also the name of the minister.
Yeah, a Minister of Communication.
Exactly.
So you're indirectly in cabinet now with names.
The fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. It's a spitting image of his father.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, so let's get to the business of the day. When Lagos says it wants to build, or the aspiration is to actually build perhaps one of the most sophisticated or the leading innovation-driven economy, what does Lagos mean by that? You're the key man here.
So Lagos's philosophy on driving innovation and technology is to use technology to improve the living standards of people. When you look at our innovation and technology master plan based on 7 major pillars, you look at infrastructure, you look at talent, you look at finance, you look at advocacy, look at communication, you look at very many areas where we think that different tactical measures can be used to drive innovation. I'll give an example. In infrastructure, for instance, improving connectivity. Over the past 3 to 4 years, we've been implementing a project to improve the connectivity for Lagosians. So our Metro Fiber project, for instance, has deployed over 2,500 kilometers of duct infrastructure for fiber optic companies, for infrastructure providers, to improve the connectivity of people, right? This can be used to democratize education, can be used to improve logistics for internet-based companies. And so when we look at technology, it's about using technology to improve the lives of citizens and ultimately to create economic value.
How is that coming, by the way, in terms of the aspiration efforts as against result gotten, percentage, right, if you will?
Right. So over the past 3 to 4 years, like I said earlier, we've done over 2,500 kilometers of duct infrastructure, which has improved the connectivity to areas such as Ikorodu, in Alimosho, where perhaps before the business case for telecommunication companies might not have justified it. We have reduced sort of like the cost of deployment for some of these companies to reach those areas where they might not have reached before. And so in doing that, for some of them, a little bit around 4 to 7% reduction of deployment to those areas. We've also seen a deepening of connectivity, even in dense areas such as VI, Ikoyi, Ikeja, the Central Business District, and the like. But it's not only infrastructure. We're also looking at funding for tech-enabled businesses. Today, Lagos State is the largest funder of innovative companies by any state in the nation. Since 2020, we've been funding innovation startups. We've been funding technology companies through our Lagos State Science Research and Innovation Council. We funded companies in fintech, agri-tech, construction tech, circular economy, environmental science, right? And we are seeing quite a bit of those companies also raising bigger checks to drive economic value. Apart from that, we also fund research and development initiatives in universities, right? Because our philosophy in Lagos is that we are not just supposed to adopt the technology, but actually to create, right? And so through our research and development efforts, we've been able to fund R&D initiatives, and we actually have a patent. We got our first patent in 2021 through a multidisciplinary team of researchers in Unilab, created a medical device, which is going through clinical trials at the moment. So in different verticals, we've been pushing the envelope of science and technology in Lagos State to make sure that the living standards of our people are improved.
And that sounds exciting. that's apart from your other initiatives, which would be the Safe City project and the Tier 3 data center that the state government is working on.
Right.
So, but as we always say on the program, that there's a difference between, effort and result. I'd like you to speak to, the outcomes of these funding efforts for these tech startups to also be able to own the innovation space in Lagos, particularly with this many initiatives that you're coming up with, because how are they, being the ones as indigenous companies taking part in this fiber optic intervention that the state government is doing, for instance? How are they the ones, taking up the contract for the safety camera project that the Lagos state government is putting in place? So how are they, being the ones that are enlisted to provide these services such that we're not importing them again from abroad?
So we have many research and development projects in our universities that even seek to reverse engineer some of these solutions so that we formulate our own unique solutions, right? If we look at a particular project, for instance, that we funded in Unilag, is using AI models to improve medical imaging outcomes. So for instance, a particular neural network called convolutional neural networks to read medical images, MRI scans, right, to improve the diagnosis, right, for different kinds of ailments. The goal of that is to improve the time frame it takes for a medical practitioner to diagnose a patient, thereby improving health outcomes, right? These are some of the original things that we are doing in our research and development projects. But to your point, even some of the technology we are using on the security side, so the Safe City, you mentioned the Safe City and things like that. We fund even hardware projects, right, in our universities as well, that look at alternative solutions to see how, number one, we can reverse engineer, we can put our own original parts. The medical device research and development initiative I talked about earlier was engineering a medical device, specifically a ventilator. So at the time of the COVID outbreak, medical devices, ventilators specifically, were around the $13,000 to $15,000 mark. So the idea was that how can we engineer something that was sub $1,000 and could be deployed to rural areas? That means could be used even where the power goes out, right? So we engineered a dual motor ambu-bag ventilator. Dual motor meaning when one motor fails, the other one takes over, powered also by solar and sub $1,000, which means even hospitals with lower OPEX could afford it, right? And we actually engineered a solution
and it's
like
efficient.
that. Yes, efficient, right?
So that cuts off, the dependence on importation of the particular equipment.
Of that particular equipment. Now, of course, for that particular equipment to be certified, it needs to go through clinical trials. So clinical trials have been going on right now to certify it as a device, and then mass production happens after that. So these are some of the efforts that we are looking at, not just import substitution, but creating original solutions. Some of the parts that were used in that device were engineered here, even though some of the modules too we had to bring in. But as you know, vertical integration happens over time, right? And these are some of the efforts that we are working on.
And that's really cheery to hear, considering the fact that Lagos is like our own California of sorts. So you have the Silicon Valley and Hollywood.
Correct, in a manner of speaking.
In a manner of speaking, yes. Right? So you have, where's the Silicon Valley in Lagos?
Yaba.
Yaba.
Yaba, right? Okay.
Yes.
I don't know if Nollywood has a location. It's just everywhere in Lagos.
Well, they used to say it was Surulere.
Surulere
but that has since proliferated out.
Thanks to the digital age, right?
Yeah.
But it's great to see the potential, and I know you've talked about a $9 billion potential inherent in Lagos tech space. I think you've talked about that time and again. But I want us to connect the potential with the reality, or with the, with the challenges that we have, right? So how are you able to use tech or drive tech, because you play a role of policy direction and encouraging the space, right? You don't necessarily get into it. How are we able to encourage tech to solve the very challenging situations in Lagos? So I can talk about what I see on a daily basis. Pollution, for example, the price of rent. Okay, let me start in order of importance. Price of rent for some people is probably the most pressing challenge, right? And availability of, houses or apartments for people to stay. There's a pollution bit. There is seeing people chasing buses just to collect 50 naira or 100 naira, or fights on the road. All of those challenges, how are you, and I want you to speak specifically to that, how are you encouraging the tech space to solve these problems beyond just everybody trying to get a startup that does the same thing over and over again?
Great. So let me speak specifically to some of the things you mentioned. Let me start with the price of food. For instance, that's a major issue, not just in Lagos, across the country. So one of the startups that we funded when we started in 2020 was a company called Price Pally, right? What Price Pally does is that it aggregates buying options for consumers, right? In a case where an individual goes to a market to purchase food, right, it was seen that the entrepreneur, Luther, that's his name, saw that when you bulk buy, it's cheaper for each of the individuals. So he created an app that will aggregate buying requests for different people. So 10 people can aggregate their buying. Behind the app, people will buy for them and will distribute to them. So there is at least a 30% savings that was experienced by some of the consumers of the app. And Price Pally is doing quite well. So if you go to pricepally.com, you will see that solution available and working. And it's a company that is quite successful now, between a 25 and 30% profit margin that they're experiencing. And through some of our funding, they've even expanded to places like Abuja and Port Harcourt. And so that's a practical example, right? So when you look at rent, right, there have been efforts by Lagos State to also try to bring down the cost of rent through the Lagos State's rental policy, trying to bring in monthly rents. Now, rent is not just a technology issue. It's also a policy issue. It's also a demand and supply issue. So there are many factors. But one of the things we've done from a technology perspective is to fund companies that help bring renters to landlords as well.
So you cut all of those?
Yes, so you cut some of the middlemen that increase the price of rent.
And the stress of having to go around.
And the stress of having to go through all those multiple channels, because the more channels you have, the more expensive your rent or your sale price is, right? Apart from that, when you look at even the science of buildings, right, we funded companies, right, that have looked at how to use more sustainable materials in building houses, right? So we funded a company that used, for instance, plastics waste to augment the composition of building blocks, right? So when you look at PET bottles, when you look at waste materials, engineering all of that into the building block mix to reduce the price of blocks, and in tests actually increase the tensile strength, right? So houses last longer and things like that. Blocks are a little bit cheaper. So companies across the board. When you talk about transportation, for instance, I'm sure you are aware of our carry card, right?
That's part of your work.
Yes, the carry card was a startup that we had worked with in Lagos that designed that transportation solution for all our transportation mix. So the buses, the train, the blue line, the boats as well. So you can use that solution across all those transportation
But we
channels.
still see those guys chasing the buses.
Right.
That bit.
So
the carry car doesn't work there.
So the carry card works with the BRT buses, the large buses, because they are very organized. Now, you know the downfall buses, for instance, have been here for years. So it's going to take time to transition those into the program and out so that it covers the entire transport system.
In talking about another element which has to do with waste management, for instance, maybe you answered that in passing, but in closing, commendable effort, at least when you were mentioning, the only one I can easily relate with is the carry card. Right. Whenever I use the BRT bus, at least I can relate. But it sounds to me like there's a lot of beautiful things that have been done, but a lot of people don't know it exists. Correct. So what are you doing in terms of awareness? Like the one, I don't know what you call it now, the one that has to do with bulk buying.
Right.
I don't think I've ever heard of it. I don't know how many Nigerians know about it.
Right.
Because anything that can cut prices of food right now, everybody's going to rush to it. So awareness, what are you doing in terms of creating awareness of available solutions you funded? And in terms of sustainability, let's go to the schools. What are you doing?
And you can bring the bill in, because I think this will give it some sort of longevity, the innovation bill you're working on.
Yeah, the bill, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Well, part of the advocacy and communication efforts is why I'm here this morning, to tell Lagosians watching about the many efforts that are going on in the technology and innovation space. So for the food solution that I mentioned, it's called pricepally.com. Anybody can actually go on the website and use it and, you know, testify to some of the savings they might have made on it. When it comes to schools, there are many efforts that are being championed through the Ministry of Education, for instance, right? We had a comprehensive school intervention where we augmented the curriculum a bit to include interventions as robotics, software programming, and things like that, to make sure that young people are also getting the technology skills they need to be productive in this day and age. And one of the things that I think is very important from an education perspective is also the innovation bill that he had just mentioned. The idea is that we need to bridge the gap between academia and industry. So academia needs to intervene and train what industry needs. And that is what the innovation bill that we're working on seeks to do, is that academia is applied. And so industry consistently feeds into academia about the skills it needs. And so academia can train, and so there is a demand pipeline of driving people from academia to industry, because that is the only way we can develop as a nation. When we have demand-driven solutions that are being funneled into the university circuit, into the secondary school circuit, right? And how do we do that? We need to put incentives, right, for industry to work with academia. We need to fund academia for the R&D projects that I had mentioned earlier, so that these solutions are being commercialized, they are being used in industry to raise the standard of living for the people. So the innovation bill seeks to incentivize the entire innovation pipeline of Lagos, so that we have a pipeline that solves economic problems, that solve societal problems. And that is the purpose of the innovation bill.
When you were talking, my mind was saying way to go. The idea is quite brilliant, and we hope the execution. And you maybe after the show, you give us a copy of that bill. Let's also take a look at it and see how we can, you know, understand it even further in educating people. But I think that nobody can argue to the effect that it's quite brilliant, because we've always complained about just churning out graduates and people leaving schools and nothing to do, and we keep that cycle. So if this bill intends to do that, I think it's a way to go. Wish you the very best.
Thank you.
Olatoboso Alake is the Commissioner of Information Science and Technology, Lagos. Thank you for coming on the program.
Innovation.
Innovation.
There's
Commissioner?
different commissioner.
Innovation, Science and Technology.
Okay, so that's mixed. Okay.
Yes, correct.
Innovation, Science and Technology. Thank you, sir, for coming.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll switch gears to the other part of the program. We're not done yet. Join us again.